tonight, the challenge in the middle. That phrase may have some meaning already. The idea is that there's three challenges, and the one challenge in the middle is the one we're looking at tonight. So there's the first challenge, which is the challenge to be the kind of men, kind of people that our children ought to imitate, since they will imitate us one way or the other, challenge of personal character. The third challenge is the one that comes to mind when the subject of fatherhood comes up, the challenge of disciplining and instructing our children in the way of the Lord. And in the middle is the challenge of building a relationship. I want to consider with you three chunks of Scripture tonight and show you that these three challenges, in particular the challenge in the middle, can be seen there. And then I want to interact with you a little bit and have you thinking with me out loud about some of the ways in which we apply the guts of the challenge in the middle to life that as we live it and as we will be living it in the days ahead. So we start with Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 to 7. These are words called the Shema, which comes from the Hebrew pronunciation of the first phrase, Hear, O Israel. But that was just a way of identifying this portion of Scripture, which is very foundational to the Hebrew faith, and so to the whole of the Bible and biblical people. Here's what it says. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I'm commanding you today shall be on your heart. And you shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And here we can see some of the challenge of fatherhood addressed to us as children of God here in Deuteronomy chapter 6. You have the first phrase, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one, love Him with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And that is, I think you'll see, the first challenge. Here's a blank to fill in. First, you be a good example of godliness by the life you live. That's the first challenge. And that good example of godliness, which you should be by the life you live, can be summarized in the life lived loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And we will do fine in terms of character on every level eventually if we are men who truly love God with all our heart and all our soul and all our might. Part of the value of our worship times together, our musical worship times, is that so many of the choruses, the lyrics of the songs, reflect that idea of living wholeheartedly for God, loving Him with our whole heart. And that's a lot of work, as you know. So if you do that and you're on the challenge, you're rising to the first challenge of godly character, you're ready for these instructions in regard to teaching your children diligently and talking to them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down, when you rise up. You can fill in these blanks. So then you teach your children diligently the commandments of God. You teach your children diligently the commandments of God. There's no doubt about it. When it says teach them diligently, it's referring to what I'm commanding you, these words which I'm commanding you. So it's the commandments of God. You teach your children diligently, and you talk to your children about them continually. That's the idea. When you sit, when you walk, or when you're driving. When you lie down and when you rise up, that is at bedtime, or at least your kids' bedtime. No sense talking about it at your bedtime in terms of the benefit to your kids. And when they rise up, bedtime and breakfast, sitting, driving around, walking, you're talking to them continually about the commandments that you've been teaching them. And that's the third challenge, right? That's disciplining and instructing your children in the ways of the Lord. So the question is, what happened to the challenge in the middle? But that's not the real important question, because we're not here to defend the three-point formula for child raising. The question is more practically, what makes this work? If you are going to be the sort of father who teaches your children the commandments diligently and talks to them about them constantly, what's going to keep your kids from walking away from that? It was an American pastor in the mid-19th century who said, his name was Charles Wadsworth, and I never heard of him before until I ran across this quotation. No, that's not the one I wanted to reach you. I wanted to reach you. Aldous Huxley, a British author, who said, "Sons have always a rebellious wish to be disillusioned by that which charmed their fathers." Sons have always a rebellious wish to be disillusioned by that which charmed their fathers. And although Huxley was by no means a godly man, he's the guy who also died the day JFK was shot and C.S. Lewis died. He's the third famous guy who died on November 22nd, 1963. He was not a godly man. But he had this notion, which a godly man should be aware of, that there is something inherent in our children which will cause them to desire to be disillusioned by the things that charm us. So as we are commanding we're passing on the commandments of God and talking to them continually, what keeps our kids from being turned off by that? What keeps our kids from growing up to say, the thing about my dad, he was like obsessed with biblical stuff. He's always talking. I wake up in the morning, he's talking to me about I'm driving, he's talking to me, why is it always, what stops a kid from turning away from that? And the answer is, it's the challenge in the middle. That is, if we can build the right sort of relationship with our kids, then that relationship will keep them from walking away from what we have taught them, even though there's something in them called a sinfulness, called a heart of flesh, a heart of stone, which is going to tempt them in that direction. The Charles Wadsworth thing is more whimsical. He says, by the time a man realizes that maybe his father was right, he usually has a son who thinks he's wrong. Generational thing, right? So when it was Mark Twain who said, when I was 14 years old, I realized that my dad was so stupid I could hardly stand spending time with the old man. And I can't get over how much more intelligent he became by the time I was 21. There's a teenage thing that goes on there, right, where you start thinking you're smarter than your parents, and that can easily propel you away from the value and the beliefs of your parents, and we don't want that to happen to our children. So we've got to encourage them to fight that within them, that impulse to be disillusioned by that which we are charmed by, or they'll walk away from our faith. How do you do that? It's the middle challenge, and you see some of it, you see a key to it in Colossians chapter 3. So we go to the New Testament. Here's what Paul the Apostle says. In a general way, he's not talking about parenting in particular, but it sure applies. He says, and so, as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. We can apply it and say, be that sort of father. Be a man of compassion at home, and kindness towards your children, and humility, and gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another, and forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, so bearing with your children, and forgiving your children whenever you have a complaint against them. Just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. And then he says, and beyond all these things, put on love. Now fill in the blank. Don't complete the statement yet unless you know it, but let's just fill in the first thing. It says, first you develop, down one line, first you develop the heart of a godly man. First you develop the heart of a godly man. That would be a heart of compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience, right? That's the first challenge again. Be that kind of man. Be that kind of hearted man. And what will happen? Well, now let's complete the text. Maybe you already know Colossians 3:14. It says, I don't mean to be confusing here, but the end of that quotation, Colossians 3:14, says, and beyond all these things, put on love, which is, you know how it goes? The perfect bond of unity. That's what Colossians 3:14 says. And I wanted you to write it out just to reinforce it in your mind. Love is the perfect bond of unity. So first of all, you develop the heart of a godly man. And then, as you summarize all that godliness with love, love is a summary of the commandments. If you are that sort of man, a heart of love for your children, then the perfect bond of unity will make a difference to you and your kids and your relationship. If you develop the heart of a godly man, then you glue, I'm picking up on the idea of a bond, a perfect bond, then you glue your child's heart to your own. I want you to get this picture in your mind, that if you love your child with a godly love, if you are men of love as detailed, compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, love being the perfect bond of unity, you will glue your kids' hearts to you. Your kids will be so fond of you that they won't easily walk away. And all that is in your heart, last blank here on this page, all that is in your heart flows freely to his or to hers. Now you know this. When you love someone, you start liking what they like. And you start disliking what they dislike. And you start getting interested in what they're interested in. That's how love works. And this will be our secret weapon in terms of the inherent tendency in our kids to walk away from what we have taught them, just because that's what rebels do. If their hearts are glued to your heart, they will be attached to you on many levels. They will love the things you love. And it will fight. It will fuel the fight against the rebellion within them. When my son was 8 years old, he had hanging by threads from the ceiling of his bedroom 1/72nd scale models of World War I biplanes. And you know why? For one reason. Because when I was his age, I had, a little older actually, tricky to build, I had biplanes hanging from my ceiling. For one reason. My dad grew up in the 30s, and he was mesmerized by flying aces. And the only aces in the 30s were the World War I guys. Planes are the quirkiest things, like box kites with lawnmower engines and big machine guns. And there was absolutely death-defying to go up in them. The lifespan of a World War I fighter pilot was like 2 weeks. If they didn't get gunned down by somebody else in a box kite with machine guns, the planes often fell apart. Put in a steep dive, the wing falls off. I mean, there were pieces of junk. And the guys who flew them were amazing heroes. And my dad taught me to love all of that, World War I aviation. And I taught my son, not sitting him down and instructing him, just loving it. If a biplane movie came on, or if there's a biplane model on a shelf, or if a biplane book was on the, in the library, I gravitated towards it, and my son picked that up. He loves biplanes because I love biplanes, and I love biplanes because my dad loves biplanes. And it's not important to love biplanes, right? You'll have a valuable life and not even know that there were biplanes in World War I. But it's an illustration of how when your heart is glued to another, you inherit the loves. So my son loves Middle-earth because I love The Lord of the Rings more than any other work of fiction. And I read the whole sucker to him over 6 months. Got in big trouble with my wife and the girls because we disappeared in his bedroom for hours on end, night after night after night. Went through the whole 3 books of The Lord of the Rings. He loves Middle-earth because he picked up my love for it. And my great prayer for him and his sisters, and anyone else who I consider like a son or a daughter to me, is that hearts bonded as they are, my love for what I love will flow freely to their hearts. And that's the challenge. To build the kind of relationship that glues your kids' hearts to your heart so that they will love what you love and they will love who you love. So let's think about that love. Page 18. John 3:16 is one of those little places. It's a quirky little thing. The chapters and the verses in the Bible are pretty arbitrarily put hundreds of years after the Bible is written. Some helpful little monk came along and divided the whole thing up into chapters and verses. It's really weird then that there's so many significant 3:16s. There's, of course, John 3:16, maybe the most famous verse in the Bible. Here's 1 John 3:16, pretty critical verse as well. It says, "We know love by this, that he," that's Jesus, "laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren." So the essence of love is the sacrifice of Christ by which he would rather be dead than see you dead. He would rather be destroyed than see you destroyed. He dies for you. And we are called to lay down our lives for the brethren. And so, of course, for those children of ours who we hope will grow up proving to be brethren in the faith. So, blanks to fill in. Loving our children means that if ever the opportunity occurs, we die to keep them alive. If ever the opportunity occurs, we die to keep them alive. This is, by the way, the same mandate we have in regard to our wives. Loving our wives as Christ loves the church means taking the bullet for her if you ever get the chance. Be a hero and jump in front of the train, pushing her to safety. That's the job. And we have the same obligation to love our children that way. And it's more natural, I think, in regard to our children, isn't it? I mean, don't you just have that impulse? If it came to it, yeah, you'd stand up and take the bullet rather than see your kids die, even if they're bothering you or ticking you off. When it came to it, the crisis came, you know that's what you mean to do. I mean, maybe we all turn out to be yellow-hearted chickens and we wouldn't do it, but then we hate ourselves for the rest of our lives. If we had the chance to die instead of our kids and we didn't take it, that's just what we should do. Well, you know what? Most of us will never actually get the chance to find out whether we have the courage to do what we believe in doing. But this is the love that we believe in loving our kids with. And meanwhile, in the meantime, or instead, you die for them daily. That is, you lay down your life for them. That's what love is. How do you die for your kids daily? That's a phrase from 1 Corinthians 15. Paul talked about dying daily. It's a matter of letting go of your own agenda in order to fulfill their agenda. It means giving up time, watching TV or reading the paper or disappearing to pursue your recreations, rather giving time to your kids. And when we love our kids with that kind of sacrificial love, that's real love. That is the sort of stuff that glues their hearts to ours. And that's the challenge to love them with that kind of life bond that will cause them to, their hearts to be so close to our hearts that what's in our hearts flows into their hearts. That's the glue, that's the bond that's going to keep them following along with us, because they just love us too much to abandon us, and because their hearts are filled with the sorts of things that our hearts are filled with. So here's the deal. The objective is to build a lifelong love. And I want you to think with me, and in fact talk out loud with me, about specific examples in view of the objective of building a lifelong love. Loving your kids in a sacrificial way so that their hearts are glued to yours. Let's think about this. I made some sort of swing at organized sports last night in regard to personal agenda and devoting lots of time to your kid for bragging rights and so on. Let's just talk about that. What would then be some of the principles that we as fathers should observe in regard to the middle challenge in the area of organized sports? I'm not at all trying to speak against getting your kids involved in organized sports. I certainly did with my kids as much as they would tolerate. I believe in that. I'm not an enemy of organized sports, but surely there's some ways in which we can use our kids' involvement in organized sports to glue their hearts to ours. And there's some obstacles to avoid, because if you do it wrong, all the time you spend with your kids pursuing their career in organized sports could separate you from them, could harden their hearts towards you. So let's just talk about that. What are some of the principles? What are some of the things we want to keep in mind in terms of the bonding power of love in regard to organized sports? Let's talk. Sure. Okay. So you want to focus in terms of the actual playing of the game. You'll focus on their development.
Yeah.
Okay. In what ways would that be a bonding, love gluing kind of thing, as opposed to separating kind of thing? Really tricky. And if you strike it rich with your first kid and get it just exactly right, where you push them, and that turns out to be good, and you don't push them in regard to the second child, because the second child will be different for the first child, right? They're all different, and so in every case there's different pits to actually coaching your son's team or your daughter's team could be a great thing. Let's just think of how it could be a disaster. Coach the team. But if your objective, and it should be, your first objective is your experience with your kid, is immeasurably when you take on their stuff to be properly sacrificial at that point. Peril here, and I'm not trying to solve any problems. I'm just trying to illustrate the challenge, right? Because you're saying to your, how old is Liam? You're saying to your 8-year-old. Now, it's a second as an old man of 30 or whatever you are, right? Well, a summer is time to an 8-year-old. So you're talking different things, right? And he may be, he's just going to be an agreeable little kid and say, sure, Dad, whole summer. But he's trying to solve the problem. I'm certainly not trying to discourage anyone from coaching his kid's team. But the meaning of love is to die daily. It's my kid going down there. It's just fraught with peril, because it might be that your kid has no future in sports at all. Comfortability and all that sort of stuff too. But the challenge is you want to glue that heart to yours, right?
Obviously, kids right now, but I was listening to a sermon a few weeks ago, and just as to what you're talking about now, I know that when one day when I have kids, that's one thing that I'm just going to have a problem with. Not a problem, but a struggle with, because I'm very competitive. Just as Brian said here. And just the point that he made in the sermon wasn't about organized sports or anything like that, but it was just more of our culture now has become a 24/7 culture. Yeah. As in, you're always going 24/7, work, sports, anything you're expected to be doing. And he made an interesting point. He said, 25 years ago, you'd go down the street, you'd see all these kids playing. You know what I mean? Now you go down the street, there's no kids playing, because where are they? Well, they're at rep baseball, they're rep hockey, or their father's getting up at 5 in the morning taking the hockey. Yeah. And there's one comment of one dad who had a kid that played 150 baseball games during the year. So at what point, if you let's kind of take the flip side of the thing. Okay, so one thing, if your son or daughter isn't good, even if they are good, at what point does it become your agenda and not theirs?
Yeah. And there's some kids are designed to be competitive athletes. They find themselves by getting totally into a sport, but a whole lot of kids aren't, and their fathers are disappointed. So let's just make something simple and go down to pickup sports. Let's just change the subject. This is simpler. What about you and your kid on the sandlot? You'll be the only two people in the whole park because everybody else is off competitive sports. But what about tossing the ball? What about shooting a puck on the street? What should we be thinking in terms of that kind of casual horsing around time with our kids? What are the issues in terms of gluing hearts together?
There's a painting in here somewhere. I saw with the garage door and Dad with his work stuff just sitting to the side, still has his tie on, and about 1 million ball marks in the garage door. Yeah. I think I would have killed a kid with ball marks on that door.
John, the dad's being scored on, right?
Yeah, the dad's being scored, and that's right. Where's that? It's in here.
It's just,
well, I saw that, and I thought that is an example of a good dad, because that garage door could be dirty. That's fine by him. And the kid just scored, made his day.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think pick up sports. If it turns into you drilling your kid because he's a little weak on some basics and back to basics, then it's all about you and your agenda, and that's not love. It should be him. So if he wants to improve his skills, then yeah, you be there and help him with his drills. If he just wants to hack around, then the loving thing to do, generally speaking, all else considered, is just hack around. Let him lock up your garage door and replace it when he goes off to college. Yeah. How about watching TV with your kids? What could be good about that? What could be not good about that? Average Canadian watches TV 24 hours a week. Some of that could be quality time with your kids, but what would make it so? Chris?
I can't talk to my kids when the TV's on. They, hello? Sure, Dad, we'll go clean our room now. And nothing else. I'm going to say it, but they don't do it.
So is there anything to be said in favor of quality time watching TV with your kids?
Well, it's what you watch too. Just for example, Corey's watching the Speed Channel, which shows the old 1970 muscle cars, and that's an era that I grew up in. And I found the two of us would sit down and we'll actually spend half an hour just enthralled by the show of the cars.
Yeah.
And he's picking up on
Perfect.
stuff I love.
Yeah.
And I'm spending time watching something that he wants to watch. And it works out to be good.
Church trivia question. Most of you know Chuck Stover, Bible student extraordinaire. Why, in the first year of Chuck's Christian life, did he not come to church much on Sunday mornings? Trivia answer. Because he was home watching WWF wrestling. Hulk Hogan, and all those guys. You know why? Because his son was 12 years old, and that's what his son loved. So on Sunday mornings, they watched wrestling. And I think, all things considered, it was a shrewd move. I mean, I'm not in favor of it at all, but either staying home from church to watch TV or WWF. But there's a guy who knew what his kid wanted to watch. I mean, Chuck is nowhere near interested in wrestling, professional wrestling, kind of like Chuck Stover is just a joke to think about. But Sunday after Sunday, he put in the time because that's what Paul was into, and he wanted to make that a thing. So it's like, lucky for you, your son stumbles on the thing you love, so you get to watch it for a while.
I've experienced it too with my 3-year-old son. Get a video from the library. He really appreciates it if I sit down and watch it with him.
Yeah.
He really likes it.
Well, there's a way of watching TV that is watching it with them, and there's a way in which it's just easy childcare kind of stuff, and the kids catch on. Rob.
I'm home every weekend, so I'm not really home during the week. I drive professionally. I don't know if a lot of you guys know what it's like, but when I get home, like on a Friday night, I'm just, every other Friday night I come home and I just, I'll have dinner with the girls. But then Saturday comes along and I pack Mom in the car, we go grocery shopping, and then they come home and we do all that stuff. But the one thing that my youngest daughter will always ask me is, Dad, can we go and watch a movie? And that means that she gets to grab her blanket. If anybody of you ever tell her tonight, you're hippie! Gets to grab her blanket and sit, cuddle up to Dad, and we'll just, I haven't, much to my dismay, after learning this weekend, I haven't done it as much as I really should have.
Yeah.
But just to sit with her for, if she gets bored or wants to do something else for half an hour, just spending that time with them. Sometimes you can comment on the movie, or she will remember the parts that you laugh at. Something happens later on in the weekend, and it'll trigger that, and she'll go, "Hey, you remember that you laughed at?"
And I will put up a little artistic plug for reading to your kids, because you can control it much more, and you are natural. It's your voice that the child's getting into her ear, and there's tons to be said for that. There was method in my reading The Lord of the Rings to Ben. It was like 200 hours of quality time and tons to talk about ever since. It's a life thing. So reading to the kids is
One thing you don't have on here is music lessons. I've just started considering Suzuki violin lessons for Peter. He's 3.5. Well, there's a commitment, because I've had to rent a violin too, and for the first year learn along with him, then practice with him 20 minutes every day.
Okay.
So,
Could be great. Yeah.
if he's interested.
Yeah.
I think he is.
One of the ways in which you can be help to each other is just having the opportunity to talk about this stuff, and I wanted to kind of create that sense tonight. There's no simple answers to this, and anything you discover with your kid may or may not be of use to other guys in the same challenges because their kids are different than yours. And so it's a very inexact science. But the challenge that I give to you, the challenge in the middle, is what's going to keep your kids so connected to you that when you teach them diligently the commandments and you and you talk to them continually about it, they'll be all ears because you've won their hearts, and their hearts are that close to your heart. So that's the challenge. We're going to wind her down here and go back to being frivolous. So let me pray for you, and then we'll get on with this night game. Risking life and limb for the sake of fun.